Hello, hello. So, as you know, I have been undoing my manga hiatus one series at a time, getting caught up, sometimes transitioning into making videos again for the newer chapters, so on and so forth. As I was doing this, I realized that I never actually finished reading Game Club. So I made a couple videos on this. I think I read the last two chapters, maybe this one as well, on video, like a long time ago, probably around 2 years ago. And if you want to go back and watch those, I probably explain kind of how I felt about the series at the time, but I'll kind of dive into how I'm feeling about it now. As I sort of rediscovered it and realized I had never finished it, I reread all of it yesterday and today. So this series is very, very special to me. Just to, I don't know, flex a little bit, I was actually partially responsible for getting the final volume translated. It had been very difficult to track down a copy of it, so I eventually found a set of all the dojins, all 11, on Rakuten, and bought that and scanned the last one. I kind of know what happens because I scanned it and I saw every individual page, but I mostly forget and I was trying to kind of do it without processing it. So this is a series about a high school club that makes video games. They start with a lot of game parodies, which I think are really, really cute and really wholesome and really authentic. Not just to all the little, if you know, you know, tropes of video games in different genres, but also just the experiences of playing games, which really hit home in a lot of ways that I'd never really seen depicted before. Just little eccentricities and just the things that occur when playing games with friends or even playing games on your own. So that was really cool, and then from there it kind of opened up into this really complex and fairly dramatic character study of some of the members of the game club, most notably Sua-chan, who is in love with objects, most in love with a little rubber ducky that he carries with him all the time. And it expresses a deep, intense sentimentality for objects. Morishita-chan, who is just kind of an absolutionist, is extremely violent, is honest to a fault, is so upset and enraged by other people's dishonesty that she becomes violent and acts out and destroys things. Those two are presented as somewhat opposites, and they never have any sort of reason to get along. Were it not for the club's president, an upper year, who forces them to work together on a game and forces them to spend a bunch of time together for somewhat mysterious purposes. In general, she's a mysterious character. She seems to have had some very gloomy past, and a lot of people are always asking her, you're always cheerful and smiling and trying to do things for people, but in fact, are you actually quite gloomy? The other side characters get some love too, of course, but those main three kind of drive the story forward. I find this series intensely, almost maddeningly relatable. Like, it's so relatable that I kind of feel like I'm like losing my mind. I've often talked about what's so special about doujinshi is that feeling of very intimate connection between you, who are one of very, probably not that many readers, and the artist who is making it for a very small audience, and just that impossibly narrow channel that allows you to read their work, and that feeling of understanding them and defying causality and chronologically and language barriers, the feeling that they can understand you, that there is indeed someone that can understand you out there, and it's the person writing this. I think that's something very, very special that doujinshi can achieve. And This is the one that really does it for me. This is the one that I find resonates with me to an extent that it's almost uncomfortable. I pressed this because I could tell this key was kind of stuck, and I didn't know what it would do. Yeah. There's something gumming it up. Anyways, so when I realized I hadn't read it, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense because it's somewhat difficult for me to read the series just because of how much I relate to it. Also, I'm reading the Evangelion Wikipedia article. I don't know, it's the sort of thing you do. But it feels like the time is right to complete it and to see what ends up happening. So yeah, I'm going to assume that you've read it up until this point. It's pretty short. If my intro seemed enticing, then, have at it. And come back and we'll read this last one together. Okay, yeah, let's see what happens. President, carrying a bunch of stacks of paper. Rather unsurprisingly, Morishita-chan still refused to go to club. Suwa-kun is still in the hospital, too. Nothing went back to normal. Beshiko-chan is back to normal. Basically, as far as I can tell. Giddy, happy, gaming. Found a fun game. Try it later. Yeah, it was like those two got added right at the start of the series, and now the series is ending and they're just gone. I'm not sure what this schedule is for. I guess the game that those two were making, the post-apocalyptic monster-raising JRPG type thing, where you're kind of digging into past civilizations and uncovering how they nuke themselves. Oh, it's the senpai that never shows up. Right? This is the senpai that never ever showed up. The one that doesn't even go to school. Right? Yoshizaki senpai. Okay. Pretty extreme character design. This weird garter belt thing, ripped fishnet tights, uniform looking the hella disheveled in every way, shape, and form. Yeah, what's up with her? She just looks like a delinquent. Why is she even in the gaming club? We don't know. I believe if she is. I still haven't forgiven you. Did I do something to you? You stole the club president position from me. Yeah, Bucho, she actually showed up. She actually wanted to make games and stuff. Sensei made the decision. Why did she even want to be president? Don't act like you understand how I feel. Another difficult to understand character. Will I find myself relating to this one too? I don't know. That's the reason you haven't been showing up for club? Huh. Whoa, I've been making games at home. Oh. I like this. There's a lot of characters in the series that have a more reasonable persona behind a very absolute facade. And I think this series is really good about kind of staking those boundaries where in the end everybody's still very human and they're not that insane, and then you see the situations where they are actually that insane, where they become triggered in such a way that whatever mental illnesses they have start calling the shots. There's the little sister. We've seen all this before. I think the way that these old style pixel graphics are rendered in the series is really, really good. It's like very authentically bad. And it has this like wonderful, really sketchy feel. Who am I fighting? Who do I gotta be? Townsfolk. She doesn't get it. She's surprisingly normie. She has surprisingly strict ideas in her head about what a game should be. But she's playing it. She's playing it. In the end, maybe she'll think it's interesting. What are they playing? Some two-player game. Most of the games so far have been never like direct parodies, but obviously very inspired by famous games or famous genres. And they've had a very good diversity. Like, Morishita-chan was usually just playing shooters, and Beshiko had like a couple games she kept going back to. But they parodied a lot of different genres. Oh, she was playing this in the last chapter, Beshiko-chan. I guess it's just kind of like a indie sprite-based cooperative 2D platformer. Uh-oh, it's drifting! It's drifting! Uh-oh. Yeah, it's drifting. And you can only cancel it out to neutral input by pressing the opposite direction. All these little things. And it's not like I'm like, whoa! Well, how do they know? Whoa, what a niche experience. But it's like the way they kind of come at it, still from like an outsider perspective, like as if they weren't addressing this to a gaming community, but rather just individual to individual. Not even individual to individual, but just an individual relaying experiences they've had playing games that you may or may not relate to as the reader. Beshiko-chan takes over. Uh-oh. I see, you can hurt each other. Huh. I see, I see. It's a very unreliable gamepad. Aw, they're having fun. This is nice. This is like a nice return to the very first chapter where they just played a co-op platformer together and slowly had to learn how to cooperate. I got the timing down. Poen. Zga. Well, I guess because it can only input... When it inputs jump, it only inputs jump for like a frame, probably, because of the way it's malfunctioning. Don't bother me. So I wonder how much of the game got finished. It looks like it's playable, and it probably has some of the content. And since they were doing all of it in parallel, the level designs and stuff, that maybe it has stuff like Beshiko-chan's Mad Island, which I really wanted to see. Their absurdist, terrifying endings. So now we've returned to everyday life. She's still trying to play with this dang controller. Something bad, terrible happened. It ruined everything. I thought that my everyday life would never return, but it continues on. Even if something unexpected happened and ruined it, a whole new one would take its place. I suppose that's why it's every day. Is this it? I kind of feel like this is it. Yeah. Alright. I don't know. I wanted to capture my experience reading it and just kind of highlight the series again. It's one of those series where I think maybe 1 in 100 people will really, really love it, and everyone else will just go, Alright, well, that was fine. That was kind of funny at parts. It was a little sad at parts. But that 1 in 100 person will just, something will really capture it. For me, there's like a few kind of obvious reasons why it resonates with me. The character of Suakun feeling so sentimental about objects that it hurts him and that it feels like torture for him to just imagine, say, like a hypothetical stuffed toy being abandoned in the rain. That's like torture for him to sustain that image. That's something I can really, really relate to. And I had a lot of different phases in my life where at first I just was like that as a kid. And I don't know if there's any reason why. It was just how I behaved, that I was just painfully sentimental about things. And then there was a period where I basically was trying to like empathy max, and I thought it's actually good that I have such a unhealthy fixation on objects and that I empathize with objects and that I consider the non-existent feelings of objects, because I thought it's best to have a sense of empathy that is triggered very easily and is very sensitive and overreacts rather than underreacts. That rather than trying to judge if something is worthy of empathy, that I would instead, by default, always be maximally empathetic towards everything, whether they're inanimate objects or animals or people or plants or whatever. Not that I could actually live like this, of course. Like, it's more of just sort of a thought experiment philosophy than how I actually lived. But it was what I would think in moments where I did still find myself having overwhelming empathy towards things that really don't deserve it because they can't actually think or emote. And then eventually, at some point, I kind of got over that, and now I don't really experience that too much. It kind of depends on the mood I'm in, I guess. If I'm in a mood where I'm already sort of sad and sentimental, thinking about lost objects, thinking about things going mistreated, stuff like that, will definitely really, really hurt me. It's not like it's been so long since I've experienced that, but I think that's true of everyone, and I wouldn't say that it's like something remarkable about my personality. But still, I had never seen this type of character expressed so honestly and understandably and relatably until I met Suakun in this series, and I was like, wow, that's me. Specific things he does, like not throwing out the pens because he feels bad, even though they've run out of ink. I used to do that. I was like, wow, that's me. He's also super fascinated with Conway's Game of Life and has a lot of empathy for the digital organisms that can form in games like Life, where they seem alive and they move around and they produce other things and stuff. I've always been super, super, super fascinated by that. And although I don't know if I've ever had like a really strong empathetic reaction, maybe that's more because I haven't really played the Game of Life much myself and I more just read about it on the very excellent Conway's Game of Life Wikipedia, Lifepedia or whatever it's called, where they talk about notable patterns. Anyways, so that was one thing. I found that I was like very, very empathetic towards all of the characters. Even the background ones that don't get very much focus, I found myself like projecting very strongly some assumptions about what type of people they were. And these assumptions weren't ever really validated, nor were they refuted, because most of the characters don't really get that much focus or explanation. But I still felt like, I don't know, like I knew them, like I felt connected to them in a way that was really surprising for a series this short. And Morishima-chan is a character that I can't really relate to at all. I experience anger very, very infrequently. And when I do experience anger, it's usually like there's things that make me angry, but then almost immediately I just get sad. Like if I read about bad news, if I read about things happening politically that I don't like, things like that, I just get sad. I don't really get mad. And then in interpersonal conflict, it's even rarer. I usually just immediately get sad and blame myself and fixate on my role in things and not really get angry about what other people are doing. And if there's exceptions to that, which do happen, like less than once a year, I can probably name every time I've actually been mad at like another person, like person that I know personally in my entire life, because it's pretty infrequent. Um, but it's like those moments are so sickening. They make me feel nauseous. They make me feel ill. They honestly, it has made me throw up in the past. The feeling of mad, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to express that feeling. I can't cry. I can't mope. I can't distract myself. I really just have to like move through it, and it's intensely painful, and I just cope with it so badly. And so I don't know, like thinking about it now, I know there was some incidents when I was a really little kid, like kindergarten, where I punched people, where I would get really mad and I punched people. But I can't remember anything about those incidents, besides that I got in trouble. Um, I guess I'm very afraid of being angry because it feels like anger is something that I cannot control or contextualize or transform into a positive feeling. Like if I feel sad, I feel like on some level that's like enriching my life, that I'm getting closer to understanding something about myself or understanding something about the world. This of course is kind of false. It's kind of just depressive thinking, the false clarity of depression. I've been reading a book that deals with this a lot called Ghosts of My Life by Mark Fisher. But it feels like when I get sad, I am getting closer to something and that my life grows in some dimension because of that. Whereas anger, it feels totally useless. It feels like just the opposite of learning and growing. It just feels like this, I'm reducing myself and it's bad. So I would never say that I have anger issues, but it's like this absence of anger and this fear of anger and this extremely poor reactions to feeling angry, where it just puts me in such a rotten mood. That's almost like anger issues in and of itself, right? Like it's a different type of anger issue. But when I read the series and I saw Morishima-chan destroying things, breaking things, fighting people, so absolute in her projection. She projects the idea onto everyone that they're hating her and they're coddling her and they're lying to her and they're just being polite, but actually they dislike her. And this, of course, makes her lash out against them, which in turn makes them actually dislike her. I felt like there was something admirable about it, and it was admirable in a way that I really, really lack, which is that I don't really stand up for my principles in a lot of situations where it would be like socially awkward. I'm the type that will mollify someone and just say what I know they want to hear if I think that that's the best way to kind of like move through the tension of a situation. I'll say really almost anything to stop people from fighting or to avoid conflict. And in situations where I know something to be the right way and it's yeah, because I used to argue with people. In my early teens, I used to really, really argue with people like all the time, especially on the internet, but even in person, I would get into these really hideous arguments with like my parents or with my friends or whatever. And that persisted for quite a while, and that was something that I felt very ashamed of because it never felt good, it never felt productive. And now I'm really the type to just back down whenever I can. And I think that's bad. I think I should stand up for myself more and stand up for what I believe in more and push these things because, you know, conflict can be a great solution in some situations. And, you know, you have to be able to recognize those and not just constantly run from them. So I thought, I don't know, she was like, the way she projected was bad and the way she dealt with everything was bad, but she was so tragic, and I wanted to see what would happen with her character. And then the character of the president, most of all, it's very, very rare for me to actually kind of like see myself in fictions. Um, it's very rare that I'm like, oh, that I'm like that type of character, I guess. Um, but for some reason, very quickly, I really identified with the character of the president. Um, it's kind of hard to explain why. I don't know. Just the way she acted, the fact that maybe she had this gloomy side. And then you end up learning in bits and pieces very incidentally about her life. And none of it at all matched my life, really. And a lot of the things she said I could not relate to at all. But something about her, even now, even having read all of it, and never really having a moment where she became better in sync with me, where she conveyed an experience that I also had, or she even really conveyed a feeling that I related to that deeply. I still felt like, oh, that's me. Like that character is me. And that's a feeling that's very rare for me. And when it comes along, I don't forget it. It's got really personal. I'm sick right now. I have COVID, so I'm stuck inside for a while by myself, and it sucks. And I'm just reading a lot of manga and watching YouTube videos and making YouTube videos. But things will be fine because I have a billion friends and a billion things to do with them. And generally, the last few months have been among the best months in my entire life. Things will just pick up like that soon enough once I'm healthy. But it's like I don't want to lose touch with the part of me that was deeply, deeply depressed for so many years. I want to feel like that part of me is still in communication with myself and with the outside world. And when I read stuff like this, I can tell that's what's resonating. That part of me. And I feel like this is my time in the sun. Things will probably get worse for me again. But things like this will be there for me. And hopefully I can make things that will be there for other people too. Yeah. That's what I think about this one. Anyways, give it a read.